Hi, this is Niall Doherty from Disrupting the Rabblement, and what follows is an interview with Michelle Nickolaisen. Michelle earns her living as a freelance writer online, charging between $250 and $400 per article, and earning about $5,000 a month at the time of our conversation. Michelle gives great advice on how you can build up a similar business, and I especially love the system she advocates for finding clients, which you'll hear in the audio. The entire interview runs about 33 minutes. I hope you get something valuable from it, and thank you for listening. So, Michelle, let's talk about first what you were doing before you started working online. What was your regular job like?
So I actually started, I kind of have two different versions of that because I very first started freelancing when I was about 20 or 21, and it was directly after I'd moved down here to Austin, Texas from rural Missouri, where I'm from. And when I was in Missouri, I was working like retail. I worked at a call center once, so I had like a Best Buy customer service call center. So those were typically like $8 to $10 an hour. Definitely, like above minimum wage, but not high earning jobs by any means. And I got super burned out on freelancing, towards the end of last year. And I got a job. I wound up getting a job at a marketing agency. And so at that place, I was like, it was very similar to the stuff I'm doing now. But that's kind of like, and I left that job in May and have been back to freelancing since then. But that's kind of like my two separate jumping off points.
Okay. So with the kind of call center stuff, you were making $8 to $10 an hour, probably doing 40 hours a week, like a typical 9 to 5 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with the agency, I don't have a car, so I was commuting by bus. So that was one of the decisions that was one of the tipping points, with me leaving, was that I was typically working like 9-hour days, and then tacking on like between 5 and 10 hours a week commute on top of that. And I've had like some energy and fatigue issues off and on, and some of it was stress, but it's just like, I joke around with my friends that it's like I'm very much I'm very much a delicate flower, and after my big burnout episode last year, it's super, super important to me to take care of myself. So working what amounted to 60-hour weeks was not something that I was interested in doing.
Yeah, including the commute, it was. I think a lot of people forget about that. They think, I work 40 hours a week, but if you're having to spend an hour or more getting to and from there every day, that needs to factor in too.
Exactly, yeah.
So about how much were you making with the marketing gig?
It was, my salary was about $45,000 a year. So after taxes, it broke down to, I think this is based off of memory, about $36,000 a month.
3,600.
3,600. 36, yeah.
It's like, why did you ever leave that job?
Yeah, right?
That commute was worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, so 3,600 a month. Cool. So let's jump ahead now. You said you left that job in May, so we're talking 6 months ago. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So 6 months on, not that long ago, how much are you earning per month now in your own business?
So the last couple of months, October, I was super, super low energy. I don't know, like I didn't really have a flu or anything, but I just like didn't have the energy for anything at all. Mm-hmm. So October, I worked a little bit less than normal, and I did about $4,100. In September, I did just over $5,000. The first couple of months were in like the 2,500 range, but I averaged it out right before our call. And the average from the last 6 months or so is 33,654. So the average from the last 6 months is pretty much right at what I was making at the job.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it took a lot of work.
Yeah. So now to sustain that, really, to say like the last 2 months, October, September, you've done between 4 and 5K. How many hours per week or per month are you putting in there?
For October, in September and August, I did about 125 hours a month, which I think breaks down to like 30 to 35 hours a week. In October, I just did like 90 hours in the month. So it was closer to like 20, I think, because like I said, like I just didn't have anything in me. I don't
Yeah.
know if it was a seasonal thing or what, but I was basically doing just client work and not focusing on bringing new clients in or doing one-off work or anything like that.
Okay. So tell us then what exactly are you doing? How are you making this money?
So I do freelance writing. Some of my money, it's probably about a 75-25 split. Maybe it varies on the month, but I kind of have a double-sided business model, which I feel like is a really smart move. And if you can pull off something like that, I would definitely recommend it, just because that way your eggs aren't all in one basket. But so at bombshell.com, I do classes and workshops and like sell digital products that are typically for freelancers or solopreneurs on like staying systematized and organized and generally like going this route without kind of losing your mind with a focus on the productivity sort of stuff. The bulk of my income comes from my freelance writing. And I typically write about business-based topics, for like software as a service companies or for tech companies or startups. Like I'm taking off a part of their content marketing so that they don't necessarily have to do it in-house.
Mm-hmm.
So like BigCommerce is one of my clients. I've written a lot for SitePoint and their audience is more freelancery. So that can be fun because it's more freelancer focused topics instead of specifically e-commerce like BigCommerce is. And then I work with a couple of agencies. There's a marketing agency that's one of my retainer clients and they do content marketing, but they just don't have the time to like blog on top of that. And then I work with like a user interface / user experience agency. They design apps in San Francisco. And so I'm doing ghostwriting for them.
Okay. So your writing business is writing articles, doing some ghostwriting, and did you say you do content marketing as well sometimes?
Well, so what I say when I do, I think it technically falls under content marketing. I typically refer to myself as a freelance writer, but I've had people refer to me as a content marketer since I'm writing blogs or blog posts and ebooks for other people and sometimes white papers.
Okay.
So I'm writing content for them that they are using to marketing, but I'm not typically super involved in like the dissemination of that content as far as making sure that it's getting shared and like submitting it to Hacker News or whatever.
Okay, cool. So take us back then to when you quit your last job about 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a pretty solid plan, or were you kind of taking a leap of faith and thinking, I really hope I can just figure this out?
I had a pretty solid plan. I think I started pitching freelance gigs in like mid-April. I had planned on quitting the job. It was a really stressful work environment and it was a small team and the woman who owned the agency was just like crazy. I mean like the devil wears Prada on crack. And so I knew that I was going to leave because I knew that the hours weren't sustainable and that this work environment wasn't sustainable. And I was planning on leaving in like June or July. And I kind of like accelerated that timeline because of a couple of things that happened. So I started pitching freelance gigs in like April. And I kind of had a lead up, like a sales funnel that had some people in it, I guess is how I would say it, by the time I quit my job. And I had actually started working on a couple of the things with them. So it was a little bit of a leap of faith, but it wasn't like a total leap of faith. It wasn't like I didn't have anything planned at all.
Yeah. And we could get into your process, but I think I might just refer people to the Learnable course that you have, because that really shows how you started landing freelance clients, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. The video that you're referring to, and I would definitely recommend anybody watch it because I think that messed up pitching processes, for lack of a better word. I think that if you nail that, that's the main thing that holds people back from like ramping up really quickly, I would say. Yeah.
Let's do a quick overview of that, though, just in terms of like the key points I think I took from that, and I'll have it linked up for anybody listening so you'll be able to find it easily. But I think one of the biggest things was to be consistent, right? To just pitch. You were just doing one a day, is that right? One good pitch a day?
Yeah, when I was at the job, I was doing like pretty much like 1 to 2 pitches a day during the weekdays, like Monday through Friday. That was my goal on top of my day job work. And then once I left, I think for a while there, for a solid month, like well into June, I was aiming to do 5 pitches a day. And so if you watch the video, I show how I basically just scoured the web. I did like 2 to 3 hours of research and pulled together all of the job feeds that I could possibly find for jobs that were like what I was looking for. And then I also did a bunch of research and pulled together a list of sites that pay. And like the big commerce gig came through a Facebook group called Austin Digital Jobs. So if you have any Facebook groups like that for a local job searching, I guess I would definitely recommend showing up for those, because that kind of gets your foot in the door. So that's how I got on at BigCommerce. But I think pretty much every other client I've had since then has either been word of mouth from a current client, or I found them through just pitching and pitching and pitching and pitching. And it seems like, I think that that's a big thing that a lot of people do, is that like they pitch like 1 or 2 things a week. And the thing is that if you were literally going out of your way to pitch, like to send 25 good pitches a week, they're like, if you're even halfway competent at what you're doing, you're going to build up a sustainable income within a couple months.
And you were pitching just by email?
Yeah, I was typically pitching just by email. Like the BigCommerce one, I think we had an in-person interview, but by the time we had an in-person interview, I think that they just really wanted to work with me. So
cool. Did you focus your pitches on a particular niche?
I kind of did. I was like, I knew that I was focusing on business topics. And one of the things that I found out is that like I have kind of narrowed that some, even though it's still a pretty broad range to say, like when people ask me what I specialize in, I'm like, well, like online business, online marketing, like content marketing and social media marketing are all things I've written about, software as a service, startups and tech, and like e-commerce. And that's still a wide range as far as I'm concerned. But for example, I was working, when I was just pitching for more like business topics, I did ghostwriting for a CEO for a while, and he like runs an enterprise software as a service company, and their clients are like also very enterprise. So it's all like Microsoft Dynamics and stuff like that. And I don't like all of that. One of the reasons that they're not my client anymore is because it took so long to get the background. Whereas all of this other stuff, it's already stuff that I read about and that I'm obsessed with. So that's kind of how I wound up like in this sort of quote unquote niche. Okay.
And when you decided to go for it and start working for yourself again, how did you know it was possible doing that kind of work? Did you see other people that were making it work?
To some extent. And part of it, it's a really long story, so I don't want to get into all of it. But I had actually, when I first started freelancing, I was doing freelance writing. And then I transitioned. I tried a couple different things. I did sort of like a consulting-based model and did like freelance project management. And all of these had their problems. And somehow I had kind of got it in my head that like freelance writing was just going to suck. Like when I first did freelance writing, I was working for really low pay and I wasn't writing about stuff I was interested in. And it was, as you can imagine, not a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I think that that's probably a big part of the reason that I got so burned out last year. And the job that I had at the marketing agency, it was kind of funny because until I started my job search, I had never particularly thought of myself as like a content marketer, social media marketer, or whatever. But just from running my own business, I had people pointing out to me that like I was already head and shoulders above other candidates for that stuff. So when I got the job at the marketing agency, I was doing that kind of stuff. I was doing writing and like coming up with like content marketing campaigns and stuff. And when I struck out on my own, I thought it was interesting because I set up my portfolio site so that I could either be working with people on strictly writing-based stuff or doing like hourly work as sort of like marketing and strategy, and not just writing, but like designing a campaign. And I don't know if it's a demand thing or if it's just that like maybe I'm a much better writer than strategist or whatever. But the writing, like I had like maybe 2 people express interest in the content marketing strategy type services, and the writing is what just like really took off. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I do know freelance writers. Since I'm so like in the world of online business and have been since I was at a pretty young age, I knew that like, I was well aware that it was a thing.
And that you could make a good living doing it.
Yeah.
So I imagine some people listening to this will be thinking that you you had an advantage because you had a marketing background, you'd done a lot of writing before, you tried freelancing before. Do you think this is something like freelance writing is something people could do even if they don't have a strong writing background or
I
marketing
think
background?
so.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think so. So what I would tell you, like, I mean, it depends on your end game. You know, like if you want to be, and I hope that this doesn't sound discouraging, but it's like if you want to be one of like, you know, James Clear level writer or something, like someone who's, and
Hmm.
I can't think of someone else, but if you want to be someone who would be considered in the top like 2 or 3 or 5% of writers in a particular niche, then it's going to take you years and years. But if you want to earn, and that's always a great thing to shoot for. Like I would definitely never discourage someone for shooting for that.
Hmm.
But if your goal right now is to just like get to where you're freelancing, I think that most people could probably do it within 6 months or less. If, as long as they, with two things, like number one, like I said, just really focusing on consistently pitching yourself, and number two, really, really focusing on honing your craft.
Yeah.
And there's a video by Shane Snow who wrote a book called Smart Cuts, and I will send you that link. And I think that if you combined the strategy that he outlines in this video, and it's long, it's like 40 minutes, but it is 100% worth watching. I think if you combine the strategy that he outlined with like the pitching processes that I talked about in the Learnable video you referenced, there is absolutely no reason that I wouldn't think you would be able to have a sustainable writing business built up in 6 months. That does assume that you're like a competent writer as is,
Yeah.
but even so, if you're constantly working on your craft, and the other thing is that like there's a lot of crappy writing out there. A lot of people are just really bad writers. Like you don't need to be in the top 5%. You need to be better than the bottom 40%. And that's like, even if right now you're just a passable writer, that's a point that you can get to with 6 months of like writing every day and working on your writing and actually like reading magazines or blog posts or whatever about how to write better, or, you know, listening to podcasts. That's definitely doable in 6 months.
Cool. So you reckon within 6 months, someone pretty much starting from scratch who already has decent writing skills, they could get to a point where they're earning how much per month? What do you think is realistic after 6 months?
Depending on the factors, I would think, and I hope that this isn't like I don't know if this is wildly unrealistic, but I would guess probably like sustainably $3,000 a month, and maybe more than that, depending on if they have. That's where something like if you already have a background in a particular thing, like, you know, if you're a software engineer or if you're like if you have a particular background that you can write about, that's something that's in demand, that would make a difference and probably skew it towards the higher end. But like even if, let's say for whatever reason, even if you were starting from a retail job like I did, and you didn't necessarily have particular industry knowledge in anything, and you didn't have any hobbies that you had a super strong background in, I would think that if you were constantly working on your craft and maybe learning about one or two niches that you were interested in working on at the same time, that in 6 months you would probably be bringing in like $3,000 a month consistently.
Wow. Okay. And to get started, just probably people think they need all sorts of things to get started. They need a website, they need this, they need that. I'm thinking they probably just need a few good samples of their work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, having a great portfolio site is good, but I think, so there's this podcast I listen to called the Fizzle Podcast, and I love it, and they say that like two of their mantras, I think there's a third one, but I can't remember what it is, are just start and don't quit. And I would say don't let, like, having a portfolio site, even if it's just, you know, some samples of your work on the site, and they're not hosted anywhere else, and it's not like a link to an article you've already published, that's great. But at the same time, if you can, you know, as long as you actually just like write something, like write an article to use as a sample and send that to people when you're pitching, and don't let, if you don't have a portfolio site yet, don't let that hold you back. I mean, get one up as soon as you can, but don't turn that into a hurdle that you're not going to jump over.
Yeah, and I think for a portfolio site as well, you mean you're selling yourself as a writer, so it doesn't need to be like a spectacular looking website. It just needs to have good samples of your writing. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are so many, the theme that I use is from Woo Themes, WOO Themes, and it's not one of their free ones. I mean, I think I got it on like a post-Christmas bundle sale. But there are so many free WordPress themes out there. There are not even, you don't even have to do WordPress. Like, go with Squarespace to keep yourself from janking around with everything for hours and hours and hours on end, or Strikingly or whatever. Like, there are so many options out there for just creating a quick one-page landing site that gives people a feel for who you are and your background, that there's no excuse to waste time in search of perfection when you can just get it done and start pitching.
Yeah. I think really all you need on a website like that is samples of your work, a bit about yourself, and a way for people to contact you. If you have those things, you're good. That's anything else is just fluff, really. You don't need much more than that.
Yeah, and as your business grows, you can add in, like, my writing site, so it has like a landing page that's got some about my background. It has like bullet points at the top so people can skim it. And like some about my background, and then like case studies and writing samples. And that's like kind of the basis of it. That's my portfolio site. But that's also like, I mean, when I first set it up as I was pitching stuff, it was just like a 1-page landing thing, and it didn't really have case studies, and it had like maybe 2 writing samples on it. And I've expanded it more since then, you know, as I'm like raising my rates and pitching different kinds of clients and things like that. But you can start out with something bare bones and build on it later.
How long did it take you to get to the point where you were earning $1,000 a month? That happened pretty fast for you, huh?
Yeah, that happened fast this time around. The last time, and like I said, I feel like there were a bunch of things I did wrong, quote unquote. I mean, like, wrong is a loaded word, but there were things that I definitely could have done better when I was freelancing before I got burned out. And I honestly think that for me to earn $1,000 consistently that time took like at least a year, and maybe more like 2.
Well, let's talk about those things then. What was it that you could have done better that first time?
So I think the biggest thing is that, number one, and I don't know how I got this mental block, is that I just didn't realize that like I could keep doing freelance writing and it could not suck. So that would probably be my first commentary, is like, whatever you're doing, if it sucks right now, like there's probably a way to make it suck less or not suck at all. Because now I love what I'm doing, but I was working for like content mills and doing like, you know, articles, like churning out articles about stuff that I didn't care about for like $25 or something. And it's just, I mean, like, I write so fast that I could do that. And there were like 3 or 4 months there where I was doing that and consistently making like $800 a month, but I hated it. So
how much on average would you get for an article now?
It depends on the length. A lot of the stuff I do is longer form, so like 1,000 to 2,000 words, as opposed to like the 500-word ones. But I charge 15 cents a word typically for assuming that I don't like if I'm doing a case study where I have to interview people, it's higher. And so like between $250 to $400 a post, depending on how much other work around the post is involved. Wow.
So you're literally up, you've 10x'd those old kind of crappy articles that you didn't enjoy doing.
Yeah, and it's because I'm working for people who like actually use the content. I mean, for lack of a better words, it's like, and I don't know if this is a greater shift that's happened in freelance writing, since I wasn't necessarily quote unquote in the industry the whole time. But it seemed like back then I was having I don't know, I had this weird mental block where I didn't think that was like even feasible.
Yeah.
And honestly, like even 6 months ago, like my rates were lower than that. I've raised my rates, I think, like 3 times since I started out, and it's 2 or 3 times. And I think that part of that is because of the rise of content marketing. Like people need, now more than ever, businesses need good content to keep people coming to their sites. So that's this huge demand for the services and I don't know if it was the same way like several years ago, but right now everybody, you know, like content marketing is like this whole buzzword and this whole new like industry, or maybe not new, but people are realizing how much they need good content on their site. So that's a big opportunity. So I think the first one would just be that like weird mental block. The second one would be that I didn't really have something pitchable. And I don't think that this is an absolute must-have for building a business online, because there are people who do like coaching and consulting and things like that. But I think that it's really hard, or at least for me, it's really hard to like sort of hit the ground running if impossible. There's only a point of proactivity that you can have. Like if you're a men's health coach or something, like people aren't posting job ads for men's health coaches. You can still build a business that way, and people do, but at least for me, it's so much easier. It was so much easier to be like, okay, like I'm a freelance writer. Now I'm going to like, I have ads coming into my, or not ads, like, ads, jobs coming into my inbox from these systems that I've set up, and they want me, and I can just pitch them, and that's it. Like, it's not.
Right.
So I would say definitely if your goal is to get this up and going as fast as possible, have something pitchable, whether that's designing or developing or writing or whatever. And the third thing was just that I wasn't as consistent with getting people in, like, so to speak, as far as, and part of that was that I didn't have something that was super pitchable. So I hope that makes sense.
What do you mean, as in your service wasn't super pitchable? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I think to some extent it was more than I realized. But so after I stopped doing the writing, I was doing project management for like online stuff, but I was really, really niched in. And there's like, I could go into like a whole tangent here as to why the project management didn't work quite out. But I was also doing like, I was helping people with sort of like consulting type stuff as far, excuse me, I've got the hiccups, consulting stuff as far as like, okay, so like this is how you can get more organized, and this is how, like this is how you should organize the back end of your business and stuff. And typically people aren't placing ads on Craigslist and saying like, I want to work with someone for a short term amount of time who is going to help me get organized. And I think part of that is just because like people know they need organization, but nobody wants to pay for it necessarily. Yeah. So I hope that like makes it a little bit clearer. But I think that's a big thing, that if you just want to get out and like have your own business and build something up, like you can pivot later. But I would definitely say think about starting out doing like designing or developing or writing or like even research. I mean, there's so many postings for administrative assistants, and like to be a good administrative assistant, you just have to like be good at dealing with people and be good at research and have an eye for detail.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point there as well about, actually applying for jobs where people are pitching your services that people are already looking for, rather than contacting people and trying to convince them that they need what you're selling. It's like if they're already looking for it, and you can just, it's like a lot of people think if there's a lot of competition, that's a bad thing, but it means that there's a lot of work there usually as well. And if you can just set yourself apart from the competition and just hustle a bit harder or position yourself a little differently so you stand out, then you can make a killing at it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's honestly, like I said, when I started out with this latest round, I was super, super resistant to just referring to myself as a freelance writer, because I was like, everybody's a freelance writer. I don't want to be like everybody. And I thought that it was going to be way harder to build up income than it has. But like I said, there's a big demand for content right now. Part of it is that I like since I'm like 100% taught and everything, and I know about business, I have sort of like a casual, slightly snarky tone to my writing, even when I'm writing about business. And that's like a differentiator. So there's room to claim your stake.
Cool. I just want to put it in perspective for people as well. So that the prices you mentioned, $250 to $400 an article, if someone is doing 2 articles a week at that rate, that's $500 a week minimum, so $2,000 a month, which is pretty good. Like if you can just put all your time into, like, aside from pitching, obviously, but just producing 2 really good articles a week.
Yeah.
That's definitely doable.
Yeah, it's definitely doable, especially, like with me, I will admit I sort of have a natural advantage because I've been writing since I was like, pretty much since I could. And I type like 85 or 90 words a minute. And so I have these really, really fast work cycles. But even if you don't have that, like, you can do 2 articles a week, and just make them and take the time to like really, really craft them. And there you go.
Well, I think like you mentioned as well, like not to get too stuck into the writing side of things or make it too specific to that, like administrative assistants, designers, developers. Like, I think what's really cool about what you've done is the system that you shared on that learnable video, screencast.
Mm-hmm.
It's really it's very automated. So you just have all these jobs coming to you because you set up the systems where they just come straight to your inbox, and then you just pitch, and you can do that for writing, administrative assistant positions, all sorts of things. So if anyone out there is worried that they're not a good enough writer and they don't really want to be a good writer, well, then there's a whole bunch of other things that this process will work for.
Yeah. And honestly, like I said, I mean, that 40% rule applies to like anything. Like, there are so many people who have set up shop, and there are a lot of, there's like a whole debate about like the ethics and the politics of like outsourcing overseas and stuff, but on a purely like on just a clinical level, it's really like there are communication barriers. So there are people who are not going to want to, they don't want to send something overseas to someone who can do it for $5 an hour, because like by the time you fix everything, as far as the communication and make it clear, they could have been paying $25 or $30 or $40 an hour even. Yeah. So you don't have to be in the top, like I said, you don't have to be in the top 5% of whatever you're doing to make a sustainable income. You just have to be like better than the bottom 40%. And a lot of times those people are really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's so true about clients will often pay a premium to work with people in the same country, or people they're familiar with, or feel they can trust more. My friend Alex, who I interviewed for this series as well, he's Australian and does Google AdWords campaigns for companies. And he said that most of his clients are Australian companies, and they pay well, and they could outsource that to someone in India or the Philippines, but they just feel a lot more comfortable having a fellow Australian managing their account.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's wrap it up here, Michelle. Unless, is there anything else actually that you think is worth mentioning that people might find helpful?
I don't think so. I think I touched on everything that I thought was really important.
Yeah, I think we got through a lot here. And again, I think the next thing people should do is go and check out your learnable screencast, which I'll have linked up. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, or if anyone wants to hire you, if they have freelance work they'd like to offer you, what's the best way to get in touch?
So you can find my writing portfolio, whether you're interested in my writing services or you just want to see how it's set up. You can find that at shellshock.me, but it's CHELLE, shock.me. So all of my domain names are plays off of my name, because why not? So, and then my site, if you want to read my blog post about like productivity and organization for freelancers, and maybe check out some of the planners and things that I have for sale, that's at bombshell.com, bombchelle.com.
Yeah, and I was looking at the courses you have for sale on there as well, which I think would be pretty helpful to people listening. So definitely check those out as well.
Yep.
All right. Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is great.
Thanks.